Ahoy! One of the bigger changes in this patch was the increase of health you get from early points in Constitution, especially 50, 100 and 150 Constitution. There was some interesting speculation about how much this will impact the meta, and today I'd like to talk about that a little bit and give you the actual numbers for all these old and new values to know how much has really changed. So let's look at them side by side. All of this is done on light equip load with the same kind of armor weight, because that affects your overall health a tiny bit, even though it's not really a massive factor, and nothing about that percentage scaling has changed, so that's unimpacted if you are in heavy as well. I just wanted to point this out that if you're seeing slightly different values, it might be because you're in a different armor load. On the previous patch, your health at 5 Constitution was 7,238. This is factoring in the permanent Hail and Hearty that you have now, with it no longer being a town buff, in case you are unaware of that. The value here hasn't changed in the new patch. On 5 Constitution, your health is exactly the same. It is the scaling for the early points that has changed. And this difference is especially noticeable at 50 Con. Here you used to have 8,620 health and you now have 9,120, so a flat 500 health increase. At 100 Con, we used to have 10,242 health and now have 11,071 health, so a total increase of 829 health here, but we have to consider that part of that is from the 50 Con, so the increase to 100 Con is 329. At 150 Con, the gap doesn't get much wider anymore. We have 11,723 health on the old patch and 12,672 on the new patch. That means the total increase is now 949, but that is just 120 extra compared to 100 Con. So the real big deal is in the very low Con territories. If we go beyond that, then you can see the values here. I'm not going to read all of them out, but what happens is there is no additional increase anymore. The gap now always stays at 949 between the old patch and the new patch, which is still a solid 1,000 extra health. To put this into perspective a little differently, on the old patch you would get 1,382 health from 5 to 50 Con. On the new patch you're getting 1,882, so a 36% increase. Then from 50 to 100 Con you get 1,222, and on the new patch that is 1,951. Keep in mind the gap here is a little bit bigger than from 5 to 50 Con because it's 5 more attribute points, and that's a 20% increase. Then to 150 Con on the old patch it was 1,481 extra health, and it's now 1,601, so it's an 8% increase, and after that, once again, no difference in increase anymore. Compared to last patch, you have roughly 6% more health at 50 Con, 8% more health at both 100 Con and 150 Con, 7% more health at 200 Con, 6.5% more health at 250 Con, and 6% more health at 300 Con. But the big conversation that came up with this was, can you just run 150 Con where you would have ran 200 Con beforehand, or can you just run 100 Con where you would have ran 150 Con beforehand? And I think this is a much more interesting point, especially with some of the other attributes being changed, like for example the 300 Dex perk now being fairly relevant for some builds. So a bruiser that previously went 150 Strength, 150 Dex and 200 Con could now shift around a little bit and run 300 Dex, 50 Strength and 150 Con instead. So how much would you lose in that case? Actually, not all too much. If you run 150 Con on the new patch versus 200 on the old patch, you only lose 539 health. Considering the overall gain between those points is 1,488 health, you're roughly just losing a third of the increase for those points, which is maybe like running roughly 180 Con on the old patch. I don't think that's a massive loss if you get some important capstones and extra damage in return, so I think this can be a worthwhile trade-off. And the same thing is true to a slightly less extent for 100 Con. Running 100 Con on the new patch compared to 150 on the previous patch is 652 HP less. The total increase between those capstones on the old patch was 1,481, on the new patch it's 1,601. So really not too bad. A little more than a third here, getting closer to half, though not quite half. But still I think acceptable if you're going for a very high damage build anyways, to just, have that 100 Con. Just keep in mind this is purely from a survivability perspective of incoming damage. When it comes to the survivability of enemies, they are also playing on the new patch, so they will have a little bit more health. So you getting more damage doesn't necessarily result in higher kill potential compared to last patch, because the target you are hitting may be running 200 con on the new patch and may have more health now. If you're going lower than 100 con, so for example 50 con on the new patch compared to 100 con on the old patch, the numbers look a lot rougher. You're losing more than 1000 extra health here, at which point I would say you probably want to have that 100 con in PvP unless you're running, I don't know, a musket and sitting a mile away. Of course, you are also losing important capstones at some point, especially when it comes to crits, so you gotta watch out with that still. But I think especially 150 con, which was previously a bit more of a glass cannon oriented playstyle, is now much more comfortable and much closer to what the old 200 con used to be, so I think that is something that people can generally opt into. Wars are the exception here, where many bruisers want to have 300 con to get the grit. But I'm not going to tell you how you need to spend your points now, I'm just giving you the numbers and you can make your own decisions. A fantastic decision you could make, for example, is subscribing to the channel and clicking the bell so you get notified of other videos like this in the future. In the next days I will talk about the performance changes because I've done some tests for them, and I also talk about some Palia stuff. If you'd like to support my content further, you can do that on Patreon. Thanks to all of my patrons that you can see here who do exactly that. That really helps me out a ton. Also thank you for watching. SLOTH out.